Dams have long represented mankind's control over nature. They tame rivers, prevent floods, and power entire cities. But when that control slips, when a dam succumbs to pressure or failure, the results are catastrophic. Today, we're diving into 3 of the deadliest dam failures the world has ever witnessed. From China to Italy and the United States, each of these disasters tells a harrowing story of unimaginable loss and destruction. The Banqiao Dam Failure, China, 1975. In the heart of China's Henan province, the summer of 1975 began like any other. The Banqiao Dam stood sentinel over the Ru River, its massive concrete face reflecting the confidence of an era. At 387 feet high and holding back 492 million cubic meters of water, it had been proudly dubbed the Iron Dam, designed to be unbreakable, eternal, a monument to human mastery over nature. But nature had other plans. The first warnings came with the birds. Local villagers would later recall how flocks of river birds suddenly abandoned their nests, fleeing inland as if driven by some primal instinct. The air grew thick and heavy, pregnant with an unprecedented combination of weather systems that meteorologists would later call the perfect storm. Then the rain began. Not the gentle summer rains the region was accustomed to, but a relentless biblical deluge. Hour after hour, day after day, the water fell in sheets so thick that witnesses described it as like living behind a waterfall. This was the 1,000-year storm, a weather anomaly so rare that its likelihood of occurrence was once per millennium. Within days, the reservoir behind the Banqiao Dam had swollen into an angry inland sea, its surface roiling with debris and uprooted trees. In the control room, engineers watched with growing horror as their instruments told an impossible story. The dam was taking on more water than had ever been conceived in its design parameters. Requests for emergency discharge were delayed by bureaucratic confusion and fear of flooding farmland. When the order finally came to open the floodgates, they found several were jammed with debris. On the night of August 8th, the unthinkable happened. With a sound described by survivors as 10,000 thunders, the Iron Dam split apart. The breach began as a crack, then widened into a chasm. The wall of water that emerged was not just a flood, it was a liquid tsunami 6 meters high and 12 kilometers wide, moving at the speed of a freight train. Villages disappeared in seconds. The water moved so fast that many victims never heard it coming. They simply vanished in their sleep. Those who did wake described a roar that drowned out all other sounds, followed by darkness as the flood swept away power lines. In the pitch black, parents tried desperately to hold on to their children as the water rose. Many would never see their loved ones again. The flood's power was apocalyptic. It tore up roads like paper, uprooted ancient trees, and demolished buildings that had stood for centuries. The water carried such force that it carved new geological features into the landscape. In some areas, the floodwaters reached the height of a 5-story building. Entire communities were erased not just from the map, but from existence. But perhaps most chilling was the silence that followed. The Chinese government, unwilling to admit the scale of the catastrophe, imposed a news blackout. While hundreds of thousands struggled with disease, starvation, and loss, the world remained unaware. Villages that had been home to thousands became mass graves, their locations known only by the tips of trees or temple roofs protruding from the new lakes formed by the flood. The final death toll, 171,000 souls, fails to capture the true scope of the horror. 11 million lives were upended. Countless families were torn apart. And when the waters finally reached eroded, they left behind a changed world, one where the hubris of the Iron Dam stood as a stark reminder that in the contest between human ambition and nature's might, nature holds the final card. Today, the rebuilt Banqiao Dam looks down on peaceful waters once again, but beneath those calm surfaces lie the remnants of lost villages. And in the memories of survivors echo the sounds of that terrible night when the heavens opened and the Iron Dam broke. The Vajont Dam Disaster, Italy, in the embrace of the Italian Alps, where jagged peaks pierce clouds and ancient valleys whisper tales of time, the Vajont Dam rose like a modern cathedral. At 860 feet high, its concrete face gleamed in the alpine sun, a testament to human ingenuity and ultimately to human hubris. The year was 1961, and Italy celebrated what they called the highest dam in the world, a marvel that would power dreams of post-war prosperity. But the mountains held secrets. From the first bite of excavator into earth, the signs were there. Workers reported strange noises in the night, not the usual symphony of alpine winds, but deeper sounds, as if the mountain itself was groaning. Cracks appeared in the slopes surrounding the reservoir, spreading like spiderwebs across the rock face. Local villagers, whose ancestors had lived in these valleys for generations, spoke of the mountain's mood swings, how it would shift and settle like a restless giant. Engineers saw the warnings. They documented them, discussed them in hushed tones over coffee in Turin offices. Small landslides became larger ones. Instruments showed the mountain was moving not in millimeters, but in centimeters, then inches. Reports were filed, concerns raised, but the turbines kept spinning. The reservoir kept filling. Progress, after all, couldn't be halted by peasant superstitions and cautious geologists. On October 9, 1963, the mountain finally lost patience. The night was unusually still. In the town of Longarone, nestled in the valley below the dam, families were settling in for evening routines. Children were being tucked into bed. The local cafe was serving its last espressos. No one heard the initial crack, a sound that would have split the night had it not been muffled by millions of tons of rock. At 10:39 p.m., a piece of Mount Toc broke free. But to call it a piece is to diminish its scale. This was a behemoth, a mass of rock and earth larger than 50 Empire State Buildings combined, plunging into the reservoir at nearly 70 miles per hour. The impact created something that had previously existed only in nightmares, a wave of water over 800 feet high, taller than the dam itself. Physics took over. The wave, containing enough water to fill 50,000 Olympic swimming pools, shot upward and outward. It vaulted over the dam like a liquid locomotive, carrying with it the fury of a possessed mountain. The dam, ironically, stood firm, forced to watch as the catastrophe it had helped create unfolded below. The wave that hit Longarone wasn't water anymore. It was a wall of liquid destruction carrying rocks, trees, and the debris of shattered mountainside. It moved faster than any human could react, faster than any warning could have traveled. One survivor described it as the hand of God, but there was no mercy in it. The town disappeared in seconds, transformed from a living community into memory in the time it takes to draw a breath. The aftermath defied description. Where Longarone had stood, there was only mud and silence. Buildings that had weathered centuries of alpine winters were pulverized into splinters. Bodies were found as far as 60 miles downstream, carried away by water that had moved with such force it had polished rock faces smooth. Some victims were never found at all, as if the mountain had claimed them as final tribute. Today, the Vajont Dam still stands, a hollow giant among the peaks. Its turbines are silent, its reservoir drained. Tourist buses stop at a viewing platform where guides tell the story, but they can't capture the true horror of that night. The dam has become a monument not to engineering achievement, but to the price of ignoring nature's warnings. The real monument lies in the valley below, where new buildings stand on the graves of the old. In Longerone's rebuilt streets, old-timers still speak of the night when the mountain moved, when water turned to weapon, and when 2,000 souls were claimed by a disaster that didn't have to happen. Their stories echo off the dam's empty face, a reminder that in the battle between human ambition and mountain rage, the mountain always has the final say. The Vajont disaster teaches us that some warnings cannot be ignored, that nature's timetable doesn't bend to human schedules, and that sometimes the price of progress is paid not by those who make the decisions, but by those who live in their shadow. The St. Francis Dam Failure, USA, the San Francisco Canyon had always been beautiful at night. But on March 12, 1928, under a quiet, waxing moon, an unstoppable force was waiting to be unleashed. The St. Francis Dam stood as a massive, unyielding giant, its vast concrete walls holding back enough water to supply Los Angeles for months. But this was no ordinary night. Living at the dam's base was Tony Harnisch-Fager, the dam keeper. With him were his young son and girlfriend living in the shadow of the towering structure just outside their door. Earlier that evening, Tony had made his final rounds, inspecting the dam and noticing some troubling leaks. He reported them to his boss, the renowned engineer William Mulholland, the man credited with bringing water to Los Angeles, a visionary known for his skill, confidence, and sheer determination. Mulholland himself had come that very afternoon to inspect the dam. After a brief look, he assured Tony that everything was fine. "All dams leak," he told him, with a confidence born of a lifetime spent taming nature. Those words, so simple and reassuring, would go down as some of the most haunting in California's history. What no one realized was that beneath the dam's imposing face, a silent battle was underway. The foundation had been unknowingly built on ancient landslide debris, and under the immense pressure of billions of gallons of water, the rocks were slowly shifting, breaking, letting the water find paths that no engineer could have anticipated. The dam wasn't simply leaking, it was dying. Around midnight, Tony and his family heard at first a distant rumble, like thunder from an unexpected direction. Above their home, the St. Francis Dam had begun to groan, deep and guttural, as if the structure itself were crying out. The concrete giant was succumbing, its core giving way. Tony, his son, and his girlfriend would never have the chance to escape. At precisely 11:57 p.m., the face of the dam cracked and split apart, the massive wall of concrete shattering like glass. And in that moment, 12 billion gallons of water surged into the canyon, unleashed in a torrent so powerful it created a wave over 140 feet higher, taller than a 10-story building. This wasn't just a flood, it was a roaring wall of water carrying massive chunks of concrete, uprooted trees and tons of earth, hurtling forward at nearly 60 miles per hour. Downstream, people were sleeping soundly when death came rushing toward them. The flood tore through San Francisco Canyon with ferocity, obliterating everything in its path. Houses didn't just fill with water, they were crushed, reduced to splinters in seconds. Families were swept away, some never even waking to realize what was happening. Entire communities vanished in moments, many still in their nightclothes, lost as they lay in their beds. The flood ripped down power lines immediately, plunging the valley into total darkness. Survivors described an apocalyptic nightmare, the thunderous roar of water mixed with the desperate screams of those swept up in the torrent, the sound of houses and trees snapping apart, and the eerie flashes of light from severed power lines sparking in the flood. Some people saw houses floating past with their lights still on, brief islands of illumination swallowed by the chaos. The torrent carved a path of destruction 55 miles long all the way to the Pacific Ocean, erasing farms, bridges and roads in its relentless path. Bodies were found miles from where they had lived, and others would never be recovered, perhaps carried out to sea or buried forever in the thick layers of mud and debris that blanketed the valley. When dawn broke, the true horror was revealed. Where there had been towns, there was now only mud and ruin. Trees, once rooted for centuries, lay torn from the ground. Bodies were found wedged under rocks, tangled in tree branches, and buried beneath sand. Search crews were stunned to find bodies on beaches over 50 miles from the dam, carried by the flood's unrelenting force. William Mulholland, the man who had almost single-handedly built Los Angeles' water empire, was devastated by the tragedy. During the inquest that followed, he accepted full responsibility, saying, "Don't blame anyone else, you just fasten it on me. If there was an error in human judgment, I was the human." Mulholland, the celebrated Titan, would spend his remaining years in seclusion, haunted by the memories of the 431 souls lost because of his creation. Today, the ruins of the St. Francis Dam still lie scattered across San Francisco Canyon, slowly being reclaimed by the land, broken chunks of concrete now covered in vines and brush. They stand as silent reminders of the night when confidence in human engineering met with a humbling and terrible failure. Local residents say that on quiet nights under the right moon, you can still feel the canyon's silent echo of that terrible midnight hour when the dam surrendered its grip. The St. Francis Dam Disaster led to a sea change in American dam safety regulations, but for the people of the Santa Clara River Valley, these lessons came far too late. Their story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying forces aren't monsters lurking in the darker. They're the ones we build ourselves, driven by ambition and overconfidence, until they slip from our control and turn against us. Dams represent both human ingenuity and the inherent risks of challenging nature. These three stories are from China, Italy, and the United States show what happens when structures that hold so much potential also become vessels of destruction. Behind each catastrophe were decisions, warnings, and oversights that, in retrospect, feel hauntingly avoidable. The people who lived through these horrors or perished in Thema serve as reminders of the incredible power we dare to contain and the devastating consequences when we fail. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history's forgotten catastrophes. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that uncover the darker side of human ambition and the deadly mistakes that changed our world forever.